got inspired by sustainable architecture, and after completing it, I had a chance to work with a firm in UK called Prism Performance. They were specialists in green building design, and also they worked on a lot of listed buildings or the heritage buildings. Upon my return in 2011 back to India, I started my firm with the aim to do green architecture, and so far I've been successful. And some of my projects have won a lot of accolades, and we did get few Bihar ratings as well, the top ones, the 5-star. So that's about me. Along with me, we have a fantastic lineup of panelists. I'm just going to introduce you. So I'll start with Architect Ponni. Architect Ponni is someone who's very familiar to webinars. She, along with her husband, Architect Oscar Concesa, they started a firm and from there on, they moved to the States, and they did their masters from well-renowned universities in the States, to name a few, Cornell and Harvard. So is where they did it, and they did it all with the scholarships. So, and once they finished their masters in the States, they've worked with some of the top-notch architects in the New York City, institutional buildings, hotels, etc. And like I said, they returned in '96, and upon their return, the practice really took off. And since the practice took off from now till now, they have won 97 international, national, and state awards for both architecture and interiors. To highlight a few, in 2004, Oscar and Ponni Architects won an award for excellence in built environment, awarded by His Excellency, the former President of India, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. And the award was for the project Satyam Technology Information, which was in Orissa. And another renowned award was the Indian Institute of Architects National Award, which they won in 2008 for Sastra by Tech Park. So welcome, Architect Ponni.
Thank you.
So I would move on to our next panelist, Architect Suraksha. She's the founder and principal architect of Midori Architects, based in Chennai, and the firm was started since 2015. She's a graduate with honors from School of Architecture and Planning, Anna University, Chennai, and she got a master's from Architectural Association, School of Architecture in London, and her master's was in sustainable design. Upon her completion, she worked with some well-known practices in Singapore and Malaysia. National in Malaysia, and her practice has won her quite a few accolades and awards, to name a few. She won the Sky High Skyscraper Challenge, the first place, of a competition, a design award competition based in Italy. So that's about Architect Suraksha. Our next panelist, Architect Jerry Meshach. He's the founder and principal architect of Gwalian, a prominent firm in Chennai, and they do have a subsidiary called Off-Center Infrastructure, wherein they take turnkey contracts and interior designing. And Jerry is a graduate from SRM University, and upon his practice, since some time his practice is established, he won several accolades. To name a few, he won Excellence in Interiors and Architecture Design Awards in the year of 2009, and he was recognized in his university as a distinguished alumni in 2017. Jerry was also listed as one of the 20 most promising architectural company in Silicon India magazine in December. That's Jerry. Jerry, if you could say hi to the viewers.
Hi, Nanda.
Right. Next architect is Architect Akwin. Akwin, you can say hi.
Hello.
Yeah, he's a graduate from Hindustan Engineering College in the batch of 2011. And upon his completion, Akwin started his practice, ANDC, which is Akwin Novel Design Commune, in the year of 2013. So Akwin does projects such as commercial, office buildings, institutional buildings, convention center, public spaces, and residential interiors. Some of his notable projects rather in Chennai and rest of Tamil Nadu, Kamaraja Memorial, Virudhunagar, Don Bosco College of Architecture, Don Bosco School of in Pannur, and Child Jesus Hospital, and Redan Media Works. So that's Akwin. I'll move on to our final panelist, architect Nikit. Nikit, if you could say hi to our viewers.
Hey everyone, good to be here.
Yeah. Nikit is the co-founder and the principal architect of his firm, a design company, or ADC. Nikhil is a graduate rather from School of Architecture and Planning, Anna University. His firm leads his firm is one of the leading firm in Chennai, and he does larger fit outs in a studio, and he has lectured across many institutions in the country. And Nikit also won an award as a young designer in the year of 2017 for interiors by Indian Architect and Builders magazine. Right. So those are our panelists. I would like to introduce you to Mr. Jignesh. Mr. Jignesh, do you have some words?
Hello, everyone. It's good evening and good moment to be part of one of best panelists, as my friend told. So we are basically a company which we call ourselves as not retailers of interior products, but we call ourselves as a consultants to the consultants. So we have one of a kind showroom in Bangalore, based out and doing projects all across India, being a part of a lot of architect firm as a back-end support system for product lines, varying from all kind of products, like lighting, furnitures, tiles, sanitary fittings, marbles, to wooden floorings, to related to wood surfaces, and all of that as an holistic product support. And we are one of the best showroom awarded in the last year, and we have a experience center not for clients but for architects and studios, where we kind of have an orientation of each product being bought from across the world, and you will be amazed to see a lot of sustainable product lines as well when I talk to you all in the due course. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak, and you can take it further. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jignesh. Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll certainly have a discussion.
For sure.
Right. Yeah. Right, viewers. So let's move on to our discussion. As you all know all know that today's topic, it's contemporary verve and design, injecting craftsmanship in playful sophistication, which is nothing but celebrating our local craftsmanship. Local when I say Chennai and rest of Chennai. Right. So, well, when it comes to local craftsmanship in Chennai, we have a fantastic array of craftsmen, notably the stone carvers who are based in Mahabalipuram, and wood carvers who does exquisite column works. And also we have a painting, Tanjore painting, which dates back to the Cholan era. So all these are celebrated in beautiful Chennai. Right. So now how this topic would be discussed today. This topic would be revolving around 3 questions, which I would direct to the panelists, and each panelist would give his experience or his thoughts or ideas. By end of the sessions, the viewers would have clarity on the local craftsmanship, how it's done in Chennai. Right. So let's start the session. Let's move on to our panelists. So I'm going to ask questions to each panelist. I'm going to start with Architect Ponni. Architect Ponni, can you hear me?
Yes, I hope you can hear me too.
Yeah.
Great.
Yes, I do. Thank you. Right. So the beauty of a good design is found in the way how it functions and also the way it captures the eye. Do these local craftsman skills make this experience any different? Oni,
Okay.
can you?
Okay. I hope you can hear me now. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'll start off with.
Yeah, we all do.
I'll start off with the definition of good design. What exactly is good design? And I love this definition by Vitruvius. I'm sure many of you would know who Vitruvius is. He's a very ancient Roman architect and engineer. And his definition was that a building should have three attributes. One is durability, it should stand the test of time. The other is utilitarianism, which means that the building should function the way it's supposed to function for the end users. It should be useful. And the third one is beauty. And what exactly is beauty? Beauty is something that is aesthetic. It should lift the spirits of the end users. So when you look at craftsmen, or you look at, and I will slightly change the term, I will call it heritage design. It is everything, and we're talking about Chennai specific, and we're talking about Tamilian specific heritage design. In my book, heritage design is very, very essential. It touches our soul. It is something that we can mentally connect to. It's a very, very strong emotional connect. And if you look at the cultural background and also the architectural background of aesthetics from Tamil Nadu, it covers three broad areas in terms of historical period. So we're talking about Chola, Pandya, Pallava style of architecture. And these have been fantastic styles that have, created wow spaces centuries ago, and it still has relevance today. So in Oscar and Pone Architects, we use a lot of heritage design. We use a lot of craftsmen. We use a lot of artisans. I basically play with a lot of marble and a lot of wood. So in my projects, and just to give you an example of heritage design in our projects, we designed, we were part of the design team for the 7 lakh square feet Lee Meridian project in Coimbatore, about 7 lakh square feet. We designed the heritage suite called the Tamil Nadu suite. And there we used a hell of a lot of wood, done in the Chettinad design. So we actually picked artisans from all over Tamil Nadu. We designed the suite and the result was a stunner. And that was a sort of a wow space even for the hotel to market it, and the end users, basically the tourists who came in from the Western world, Eastern world, found it a very interesting space to stay in and experience the culture of Tamil Nadu. The other project that I'm really, really fond of, and it is kind of memorable to me because I did it with my son, my architect's son. We designed a 20,000 square feet home, residence for a very prominent healthcare professional in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And what we did there was, the brief given to us was to create a Chettinad home with a fusion of a little bit of Islamic design. And so we created this V-shaped inward-looking courtyard garden home. And I can't tell you what a fantastic experience it was, because we fused in Chettinad design with Malay design. And every stick of furniture, doors, windows, columns, we actually created about 50 columns. All of this was done in the Chettinad style and manufactured in Chennai using hand craftsmanship and CNC machines, transported them to Malaysia. We shipped it to Malaysia and had it assembled by our artisans, again brought in from Tamil Nadu. So these are experiences where we used a lot of heritage design and hospitality, residential projects. And I think this is a wonderful way to showcase our culture. We should be proud of our heritage. And I think this is our craftsmen and artisans are actually people who can bring forth and create these fantastic pieces of design, which collude with our overall layout. So I think, yes, it's very important to have these, bits of culture coming in, heritage coming in. And I think we are the drivers of the spirit of the continuum of carrying on our heritage.
Right. Sounds very interesting. Right. I'm just going to pass on the same question to Nikhil. Nikhil,
Okay, so I mean, we're a much younger practice. It's been about 7 years now, and one of the reasons why I was excited about sort of talking about this today was um, a lot of our learning as a practice has come from sort of the contractors and the craftsmen that we work with. So um, the idea of craft is extremely deep rooted um, in in our environment, but I think increasingly it's also being lost. So we've always been extremely drawn by the work of people like Jeffrey Bawa, Bijoy Jain, and these were inspirations for us when we started practicing, or we set up ADC. And so initially, our entire experiment was to head out and find people who could do the things we liked when we did our own studio up. So our first project was actually our own studio. So for us, the idea of craft is sort of embedded in the way the practice functions. And our practice has grown with these craftsmen who we met during the making of our own studio. So for us, I think they're an extremely integral part to who we are and how we function. And in many senses, as we begin to grow now and we start doing work in different geographies, we're trying to make it a point to build those relationships. So I think that's pretty much what I'd like to put down here, which is the fact that we actually deeply respect craft and the people who help us realize what we draw up. Yeah, so that's that. So I'll leave more for the other panelists to say. Thanks.
Right. So Jerry, so
Yeah, Nanda.
what is your take on that?
I accept with what Nikit said. Actually, the entire craftsmanship is being lost nowadays. Even though it is very unique in the older days, everything is lost. See, let me put in a layman terms. Everyone knew what is red oxide flooring. Nowadays, we are not using any red oxide flooring. That's one of a very useful flooring where the floor breathes a lot, and it involves a lot of technique. It doesn't involve a lot of technical aspect like what we do right now, and which is also eco-friendly right now. And moreover, there's something called as mud plastering and lime plastering. What we do in Chennai, those are very necessary things which reduces the heat. Chennai right now it's experiencing more than 41 degrees, whereas doing all these kind of plastering will definitely reduce the heat to 4 to 5 degrees lesser than what we do. And there's something called as clay pot filler slab roof, and which decreases the cost of the roof slab by decreasing the steel, the concrete by 30-40%, whereas it reduces the cost for the construction also. But on a current fast-paced trends, most of the people are not looking for these kind of stuff. So most of the people, they are looking for a very fast-paced construction. Thereby, they want to complete the project as it is. Whereas the red oxide flooring, as such, it will take at least 15 to 20 hours at a stretch workmanship for them to complete it. Whereas it is more eco-friendly, and it breathes, it brings in air inside the room. But whereas people want to finish it very quickly. By that, as Nikit said, the entire craftsmanship is lost, the artisans is lost. We are trying to find some clients who are very, very much towards these kind of artistic things, where they want to look for these kind of craftsmanship, not much are appreciating it. And that's the reason why the cost of these kind of craftsmanship increases. Like you said, making a sculpture or a tangible painting, it's very rare to find nowadays. So in this fast-paced construction, everything is involved with new innovative materials, which involves a lot of chemicals, a lot of innovative things. Quick pass, like something like a fast food. You need to construct your building in 90 days or 12 months or 1.5 years. In such case, this craftsmanship lost their importance. I would say these are the major things what this Chennai should hold on back, and we have to think about it. As an architects, we need to put on all these kind of stuff in our new projects. And we need to enlighten the younger generation about about these older techniques to the newer generation. So that is what my take for this topic, this question of yours. I think I leave it to the other panelists to answer more.
Yeah, before I move on to the other, I believe you have a setup where you do work on craft. You have a factory where you produce such artistic works.
Yes, we do have a manufacturing unit when it comes to wood, anything to do with teak or anything to do with other woods. We do have a manufacturing unit where we innovate. We try to reinvent the products, the older design products to in abstract version. So we are planning to do that. We have a separate divisions for the product design, and that we have a facility here in Chennai. We have a 5,000 square feet facility which does all these kind of things. So anything to do with wood, we are trying to experiment, trying to bring the older craftsmanship into the newer trend.
How is the response to that from the clients? So
most of the clients are liking it until they touch and feel. They have a look at what we are doing it. They are not responding to it. Seeing at a picture, they don't feel. So only if they come and experience what is happening, they appreciate it and they are looking forward to take it forward.
I believe I agree with you. Time plays a big factor with most of the clients, and then everybody comes in before even the design is started. They just say, "I want a house or the building in 1 year." I think that's how it starts. So pretty much, I think for us to start, I think it's looking at these sort of artistic works. I think it takes a back step. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Nanda.
Yeah. Right. So I'll move on to architect Akwin. Akwin, would you like to?
Hello, Nanda. Hello to all the panelists. So Nanda, sir, pondering upon your question, as in, you just said it is all about how a space is functional as well as aesthetic and how, crafts affect it. So now, I would just like to talk about this slightly away from the technical side. Let us just talk on the other front of it, because all the technical side has already been spoken. See, when we design as architects, we, take up a brief and we create spaces and we make it functional. And we think about the aesthetics, how it's going to look and feel and all of those aspects. So to us, details, as details, what I mean is, a specific part on the facade or, in the interior, let it be anything, let it be a door or let it be the tile or, the ceiling or even something as simple as the doorknob. When we break down into these details, to us, they are just elements and components of design and building. But whereas when you consider a craftsman, what happens is this is his canvas on the whole. See, in the same project, an architect could actually do the spatial planning. Let it be 5,000 square feet, let it be 50,000 square feet, doesn't matter. We could create a brilliant spatial plan and everything. And once this whole structure, as in, the functional structure of design is done, the next part of it, when craftsmen get involved, it takes a totally new dimension. There could be 100 craftsmen working on one single project. The whole thing is, crafts by default is being seen only as art. There are so many functional crafts. When we look at, Chennai architecture and how it has developed, functional crafts cannot be let out. Very simple cottage crafts. Something like making pots, pottery, clay, terracotta work, and even, doing things with leaves. So there are a lot of subdivisions to it. So inside a house, it could be a very brilliant, detailed door or a window, or it could be a custom-made Atanguri tile, or it could even be something like, woven Rajasthani curtains for a window. So any design, right from, terracotta murals or stone claddings or stone sculptures on the facade to the finest detail on the interior, it could even be on your couch, doesn't matter, or just a display object. All of these, as crafts, there is a huge variety to it. And how craft enriches it is, craft has a cultural value to it and historic value to it. In design, we always have reference. Okay, so in design, it is more of spatial program. And you just understand the area. And then you understand other aspects of sustainability, climatology, and all that. But when you talk about art and end utility, when we are looking at crafts, there is a multitude of things which, if the architect can aesthetically balance everything without getting gaudy, the output would be a masterpiece. Like Pune ma'am was describing about how her interior design for that suit was, and how Nikit was telling about how all craftsmen make an integral part. See, that's what I'm telling. It is not like you go to the very end detail. What you do is, that you need a very good detail on this particular door, or that, this particular tile is going to be changed. It has to be unique. From then on, you give the artisan his freedom to work with. And then he comes up with something. So you just make sure that, there is a certain guideline to it and the end product is brilliant. See, even on a terrace garden, we could still have a gazebo, which is in Japanese style, and we could still have that building somewhere in Tinagar or in Triplicane. Doesn't matter. And, in the first floor, something else, it could be a totally different theme. So the whole idea is when a craftsman does something, he is showing his experience, which he has inherited centuries together. And it has a cultural history for it. So if we go to a traditional Chettinad house, you just have to look at the door. No, on that door, there is a storytelling by itself. There is a big deity, then there is
more.
So I'm telling you,
so what I understand is
value and cultural and traditional value embedded to it. It is not just like, simple detail of it. So as architects, we might see crafts as detail, but it adds more than just, technical design detail value to it. That's what I'm telling. And
you're trying to say when we want to celebrate craft, so I think the intention should be much earlier than rather adding it as a decorative element.
Yes, definitely. See, the thing is, of course, like Jerry was pointing out, time factor. I would also like to point out the cost factor. What happens is, you cannot always get everything in a certain budget or a certain time frame. When you want a good product, when you are trying to deliver a good product, if you have sufficient resources for it and if you have sufficient time for it, then of course it could be delivered. When there is a very short time span, then maybe, like Jerry said, certain things would have to be narrowed down. But pertaining to the question of how crafts add value, I would say that crafts have a historic and traditional value to it more than just, design value to it. So I would like to, give it on to the next panelist.
Thank you. Right, architect Suraksha. So what do you think about that?
Yes, so thank you, Nanda, and hello to everyone here. Well, I'm a big believer that buildings are meant to complement their context. And this can only happen when the core of the design is rooted in true bioclimatic principles and encourage a natural ecosystem that acts as an environmental modifier for its users. And since the start of Midori 5 years ago, we have been very fortunate to get clients who are literally tree huggers and really care about the future of our planet. And it's more so important given the current, climate change acceleration that we're seeing around us. And our aim has been to prioritize processes in climate responsiveness through our green approach for all our projects. And we're able to produce ecologically sensitive solutions, be it an interior space or a part of an exterior architecture. It can come to fruition only when it is in tune with the local and vernacular. And this building with natural materials and reviving traditional crafts and harnessing local talent is something that's a priority for us. And it's also good that, key market-driven green schemes like LEED and IGBC, I know that you also work a lot on these kinds of projects, encourage the use of local materials and local talent, which is great. And hopefully even products that have a shorter life cycle that can be easily renewable rapidly. And that's something which is something important, that we have to also conserve our resources in this planet because it is limited. And hopefully this would, sort of revolutionize the supply chain and global trade. Right now, everybody is into getting furniture manufactured in a country like China and bring it down because of the prices. And the craftsmen here can't really compete and sustain in those kind of scenarios. So for me, your question about beauty, personally for me, beauty lies in the discovery of a traditional technique and then sort of experimenting it in an artistic and authentic way that aims to create a kind of a high quality space for your client and examine a kind of a positive human behavior through all of this. And in this exploration, in both creation and repair, and improvising it in a way to meet the challenge of bringing it to the modern era. That's something that I find very interesting. And usually sometimes it's done in ways which probably the traditional craft was not meant for. And the clients that come to us increasingly are second generation. So they're in the cusp of a paradigm shift between the old and new. So while they seek traditional values, such as Vastu, which is something that's extremely an example of what is important in planning, but also have a huge appetite for modern aesthetics. And I think using the crafts does provide an experience that creates something very unique to the context, and not sort of a cookie cutter home or an international style, one size fits all sort of an approach. And I think for that, architects need to really hone in their adaptability skills, and that is really paramount. Yeah, back to you, Nanda.
Yeah, so what you say is more than the art side. So we have to look at the craftsmen to contribute to the functional side as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, great. Well, so my experience, I had experience in ITC Grand Chola. I did stay there, and I sort of met where luxury meets, the local craftsmanship. So at one end you have sci-fi Italian marbles and things like that, and I was told 4,000 artisans from Mahabalipuram were involved in that project. So with all the stone carvings that you see in the porticos and the balustrades and so on and so forth. So something it's something just where the local craftsmen were given importance despite being in a luxury project and things like that. So not just luxury projects alone can take that. Any small residential projects too can involve the artisans, something like that. Right. So I think that the first discussion, the first, the next area where we can explore the craftsmanship skills further. And right. So in today's technology-driven design field, does the technology helps or sidelines craftsmanship skills? That would be the next discussion. And again, I would like to start with Architect Puni. Architect Puni?
In my mind, technology is an enabler. And why an enabler? See, there are two parts to this question. If you look at today's culture of client expectations and client briefs, they're mainly contemporary. You see, I started my practice about 2.5 decades ago. The client briefs then and the client briefs now, there's a huge, vast difference. So today, most of us practice minimalist contemporary architecture. At least that's been the demand from my client side. And I strictly go by client briefs. And of course, based on the briefs, I also throw in my thoughts, and I have a certain design philosophy. And I've seen technology change a lot from what it was 2.5 decades ago to what is happening right now. Today, we actually work with 3D printers. We work with CNC machines. In the US, they already started testing robots to work on construction sites to minimize the labor component. But in my projects, and I will take a certain project called the Raghavan building, we built that a few years ago, and that was a very contemporary building, very, very, the design vocabulary was highly contemporary. We had to use a lot of stone. In fact, we shipped blocks and blocks of stone from Karnataka to Chennai. And we had fascia, which was about 4 inches thick. Normally it's 20 mm, but here we had 4 inches thick stone blocks that were to be installed on the face of the building, because the design involved different depths. And we actually thought it could be done mechanically, and we couldn't. We actually had to go back and get an artisan from Bangalore, bring him here with a set of team, a whole set of team, in fact, I would say teams, to chop the blocks, size them, and they had their own fantastic time-tested way of installing it on the fascia of the building. And this was a multi-story building, mind you. First two floors went to, I think, the iPhone showroom and their offices, and the third and fourth was all residential. Of course, we created a courtyard in the fourth and third floor with all the living spaces looking inward. And the stone was also used, Sadarhalli grey stone, my very favorite material, was also used for the interiors. We're talking about murals, we're talking about granite inlays. And the granite inlays, we use CNC machine because, you know, we use actually stone, something called stone veneers. But if you see, the landscape element was fully Sadarhalli grey and so artisan oriented. So even though the design was very, very contemporary, we had to go back, use the artisans to bring in their talent to install very, very contemporary style of stonework. So that's as far as contemporary design is concerned. But then when you look at technology per se, I'm going back to CNC machines. We do a lot of projects in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And what I've done today is bring in CNC machines and maybe one or two artisans to these islands, and we create lattice screens. And mind you, I work with different types of screens. I use stone screens, natural stone screens. I use GRC screens, glass reinforced concrete, and I also use wood screens, timber screens. And for all of these, intricate heritage work, I use CNC machines. And so for me, technology is a great enabler. It enables me to finish my projects quickly on time, maybe scale back on the labor a bit. But if you look at hardcore heritage work, you will need artisans. There's no question and doubt about that. So in my mind, I would say that, technology is an enabler. In no way does it shut the artisan out, but it's very good for a little more, mass production of design elements, because I deal with large international projects, and over there time is of essence, and it's also how much you can produce in the short time span. So if you look at now, today we are living in 2020, but if you look at 2030, the way forward, I have a habit of looking, I don't know, 10, 20 years down the road. See, we're going to have something called smart living. The way we live is going to get a lot more smarter, a lot more technology oriented. Make no mistake about that, because looking at the COVID scenario, we need to rely a little more on technology. And case in point is our Zoom meeting and Zoom conference here today. So there's going to be smart living. There's going to be intelligent work, an intelligent office design, intelligent office operations. And then lastly is the business of, technology coming into every sphere of our life. So these are the three factors that we'll need to look at going forward. But still, in whatever frame, I mean, I'm talking 20 years, 30 years down the road, technology may take over. There's no question and doubt about that. But heritage is still going to be a very, very important part of our lives, because again, I'm saying it's something that touches your soul. I mean, we can use semantics of how these things come about, but it is the essence of our soul, and the essence of our soul is in the in heritage design. That's my take on technology. Like I said, I interface with a lot of projects in the West, and today 3D printers is something that's coming to our rescue to do things very fast if we don't have artisans per se. That element of heritage design is always going to be there, and I hope it is there.
Right. Yeah, thanks for that. Move on to Nikit. I'm just going to ask you the same thing. What do you want in technology and craftsmanship?
So I'd probably have to say that I think technology is probably a double-edged sword. I feel it both enables and cripples craft. So one of the things we're sort of consciously doing or reflecting on in the practice is, the pace at which work is done. I think capital, the fact that we work with real estate and it involves large volumes of money, there's a great deal of impatience. So obviously this is coming at a cost to craft, right? Technology is a solution. It's also a problem. I mean, at its most simple is many of the challenges we face around comfort in built environments today are also created by the decisions and technologies we've adopted. So, case in point, we just completed an office which was located within, a conventional glass box IT building, right? And the client who was kind of moving in there was moving from an independent house, right? So the first time we visited him, we noticed that most people had their ACs off, the window open, and fans on, right? But when you slip into an IT building, the fans disappear, the windows can't be opened, right? And you're committed to the air conditioner, right? And invariably, that decision will be driven by something like a package unit, which was controlled by cost, right? Because the owner of the building will not want to spend a great deal upfront. So there were many of these decisions that we questioned, right? And we were the question on our mind was, how do we move this person from where he is into this new place he's going, right? But preserve the essence of sort of what he was comfortable with, right? So one of the things we brought back was we actually did ceiling fans, right? It's a very small sort of maneuver, but this has nothing to do with craft, but it's more my criticism of technology, right? So for craft to be preserved, there needs to be a balance, right? Craft needs patience. Craft does pay off. It's a longer sort of payback period, but it does take patience. So one of the things we are actually doing, we're actually pivoting back, right? If anyone has actually stood in Senate House, right? We got to sort of walk in thanks to the photo biennale. And if you stood there, I think buildings at that period are a beautiful example of how craft, technique, technology, and formal training kind of come together to create environments that really work, right? They celebrate craft, they celebrate technology, and they also celebrate culture. So I'd struggle to find a contemporary building that captures all these things at the same level. So if the conversation today is about how do you encourage and keep craft alive, I think there has to be a careful balance on how much technology we choose to adopt and how impatient we get. And also, I think one very quick note here is, of course, I think how transient design is getting. We refer Chettinad about those buildings lasted hundreds of years, right? And they're still going strong now. A lot of the work that we do today has about a 5 or 10-year life cycle, particularly in interior, and they quickly sort of fade out. So one of the things we're trying to think about is, of course, how environments can be adaptable, right? How do you use material that sort of is honest to its lifespan, right? There's no point in spending money on teak if you're going to toss it out in 2 years, which is why most restaurants today prefer to go with NDF or something that comes straight out of China. So the challenge today is the idea of balancing life cycle, because the minute you do that, you start assigning value to permanence and how long it lasts, and perhaps you go back to promoting craft and working with people and their hands. So I would be a little skeptical on how far technology is the solution, right? So if technology is coming from our end, it would probably kill craft. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I just thought
the spirit of the artisan. So, and Nikhil, what about the spirit of the artisan? So do you think technology takes it away?
So I would actually think that it depends on where this technology is being sort of slid in. If the artisans were kind of adopting new technologies and the drive is coming from there, perhaps. But if the architects are kind of instilling it, I feel it tends to cut the craftsman out of the equation.
Right. Thanks for that. And Jerry?
Hi. Let's come back to the question whether this technology helps or sidelines craftsmanship.
Exactly. Does it help or sidelines the
I
craftsmanship?
would say that the technology is penetrated into our lives extensively. And I would say there are two technologies in architecture, let's say construction technology and the design technology. The construction technology, if you talk about the construction technology, that is definitely a bane for the craftsman, because let's say a 3D wall printer, if you bring a 3D wall printer, there's no job for a craftsmanship for him to build a mud wall. The 3D wall printer, by one day, it will build an entire house, whereas the craftsman will take a month for him to build it. In that case, the technology has overruled craftsmanship skills. When it comes to design philosophy, I've seen the growth of technology in designing, like from AutoCAD R14 to AutoCAD 2019, 3ds Max Vist to 3ds SketchUp, V-Ray, and other stuff, where you can design your product. The craftsman can design your product. They can see it lively of what, let's say, an Athangudi tile craftsman is going to do something with the tile design. No, he can do whatever he wants in virtual reality, and then he can even place it in the floor, and he can see the patternized different types of pattern he can play with. He can give a design, kaleidoscope design, kaleidoscopic design is flooring, rather having a repetitive designs. No, in older days he has to have one design which will be repetitive, and that also is unique. And nowadays, if the technology is given paved way for the craftsmen to do whatever design to the entire house, they can even do a 3D view of their patterns, and they can even start a work with it. No, that case, the technology definitely has craftsmanship skills. I wouldn't be against the technology, or I wouldn't support the technology when it comes to craftsman skillship. Rather, nowadays we have to adapt to the technology. Should adapt to the technology, and they have to upgrade themselves on what technology offers them, and they have to produce a product accordingly. So that is my intake on it.
Yeah, again, it's going to be something like what the client wants, really. If the client wants a flavor of the artwork that he wants to, I think then it has to be directly from the artisan without any technology. And if, like our topic, if the client wants a contemporary version of the art, I think then technology has a role to play in that.
Exactly. Technology plays an important role right now, and it will not go away. It will improvise. We have to fit to the technology.
Yeah, but it gives us a lot of possibilities. It just pushes the boundaries. Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah. Right, Jerry. Thanks for that. And move on to Aquin. What is your take?
Sir, see, I totally agree with whatever Nikit said. But at the same time, I also agree with what Puni ma'am spoke about. See, the whole thing is that Chennai, or say on the whole, even in India, practice 90% is totally client driven. See, we design in a supportive economy. Okay, so we are a developing country and we are a developing economy also. So here, what happens is, anybody who's making up an establishment and who needs, architects to do jobs for them, what happens here is everybody has a stringent timeline, everybody has a stringent resource, and there is already an end demand which is waiting. Most of the industrial projects, or, let it be even an office building. Say, let me just give an example from an office building point of view. There's a client, they have a property to be promoted, and they have financial plans already. They have to give the place out for rent, and they have to tally out their own economical conditions and all that. So these kind of things happen even in institutions. When you are working on a school building or on a college building, you always have a deadline. You have to deliver it on a certain date, and they have to take their admissions in. So this time factor cannot be outruled at all, and hence it is inevitable to use technology. But at the same time, pertaining to the question, if I have to answer it, if we are looking at it as if it sidelines the artisans, yes, I would agree to it. I would agree along with Nikit on this factor. Yes, it does sideline artisans, because see, let me just talk about something regarding CMDA. A lot of us, we know about how the Heritage Committee and all these bodies work, or how in hilly stations, Hakka Committee works. The government, it gives us strict rules to follow. They say you promote something nearby a heritage building, you're supposed to mimic it. Fine. But can we really opt to the traditional method of construction today? Practically, it is not possible. It's going to go 3 times the cost, 3 times the timeline. We cannot make 20-foot high pointed arches today. You cannot make brick fire walls for 2.5 feet today. You have to go in for a post and lintel concrete construction. And then, at the end, what happens is there is only mimicking of traditional craftsmanship. on a large scale. Even when it comes down to furniture or design detail, of something which you use in the interiors. See, sometimes, yes, there are people who really love art, so they value art and they look at craftsmanship as art and they're willing to pay for that. So that way, a craftsman gets benefited. But we cannot say that people should not have a choice of aesthetics if they do not have the affordability. Might as well any person, in a middle class household, he could still like something which is very artistic and he might really want something like that. Maybe he's not able to hire an artisan for that. Maybe he's not able to afford a very intricately carved door or a cupboard. But 10 years back, we've already shifted into doing our furnitures and cupboards and everything with particle boards and heat press laminates and all that. So there is a demand as per desire, and there is technology to deliver that also. So you cannot complain on a person who's manufacturing that, nor can you even complain on the person who wants to have that, because everybody has a right to desire whatever he wants. And at the same time, you cannot also support this completely, because end of the day, you are talking about arts, crafts, and the beauty and aesthetics of it. But what are we doing at an economic level is we are taking inspiration of his work. We are actually replicating his work, which was years and years of knowledge which was passed on to him. And at the end, he goes, he's actually losing a lot of opportunity there. So just think about it. Like you were giving a reference about how IETC grants allow work. So 4,000 craftsmen being engaged gives them livelihood, But if that particular typical thing for its time constraint or whatever was made completely by CNC or, by post forming, don't you think that so many people are going to lose livelihood? So a simple thing, even if you take a household detail like a water dispenser that which we use today, we have lost pottery. And ever since ferrocement pots and landscape elements of ferrocement came into picture, potters have been slowly losing out. So what would happen at a certain point of time is, yes, everybody has a desire for aesthetics, and everybody has an issue with affordability. So we would always be catering to the needs of people and we would be delivering things to them. But slowly we would totally eradicate the livelihood of craftsmen and all. Say this happens at every level of detail. This might be on the facade of a very glorious looking.
It happens at the two level. One is you dilute the art, and then you dilute the artisan arts.
See, simple thing. Right now, people are just mimicking, terracotta instead of, FRP has come in as a substitute for pretty much any sculpture today. See, they just make one mold. Pretty much, they just purchase one statue, and with FRP they just do replicas of it. So, where is the support to the craftsman for that? Of course, yes, we are supporting clients, we are giving them affordability, and we are a developing economy, and we cannot always, burden our clients. It is not our part of authority. It might be considered as our responsibility to pitch in for the craftsmen, but we do not always have the authority to make the client do something at his expense to support craftsmen. The end call is always with the clients, and of course we also have to support his taste of aesthetics.
I'm going to interrupt you, so we're having a time shortage. So
Nanda, can I just interrupt? I'll make a very quick observation.
Yeah, okay.
I work very closely with artisans because I do a lot of marble work, a lot of wood work. These artisans have become very clever. They've upped their technology. There are guys, when I give a design and overall layout, they will go to the CAD, they give me an AutoCAD drawing. I'm talking about artisans. They are very, very, they've upped their knowledge of technology. So I don't think this business of, we've shelved them off. No, they have upped their technology and it's so much easier for me to work with them. I'm going to borrow Jerry's point of making those tiles. I work with Athagudi tile designers all the time for my heritage projects. They give me so many combinations in the computer. We're talking about artisans from Chettinad. So it's not like they're throwing them off the scene. They are very, very stronger now, in my opinion, because I do heritage projects all the time. So it's just a quick input. There's no way we can do without them. Absolutely no.
Thanks for that, ma'am. Right, so Akwin, I'm going to leave you there and move on to Suraksha.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, all fantastic thoughts there, and I completely agree with Pony as well. Where do I start? Technology is just here to stay, from augmented reality to before construction, 3D printing, using artificial intelligence within the design process. Or it's increasingly rare to see any architectural project that does not use some kind of a digital tool or some kind of parameter for design or fabrication. And if it's a performative criteria, whether it's structural or geometric relationships, environmental or experiential qualities like light or airflow. I think the biggest criticism of the so-called parametricism and digital architecture is that when it is realized, and if it is realized, that it's not sensitive to the contextual issues. And I think that's something that we need to work on, because the unlike historic buildings that are really steeped in local context. And to one thing about sidelining the artisan, I think we have to bridge the gap. They need to up their game, and also we depend on vendors and the supply chain to kind of help us bridge this gap. So we have to rethink the basic building blocks and the ability that buildings need to be constructed in a certain time frame. And if there was a way in which there was some kind of prefabricated elements or modularity where we could use this in interesting way, but also be able to build it at an incredibly fast rate, and streamlining the craftsmanship process so that, carpenters back in the day, they used to season wood under different weather conditions, and it used to take years, and nobody has that kind of time and luxury of time these days. So if somehow the entire sort of production chain can work in a way in which rethink the stages of production rather than mass customization, I think that would be the key, and make it more relevant towards today's urgent issues. And I think that's a good way to bring back the mixture of old and new in a good way. So that's pretty much my thoughts on this.
Right. Right. So that covers the technology aspects of the craftsmanship. Right. So I'm just going to quickly ask you another question, which all the panelists are going to discuss. Right. As architects, as practicing architects, how are we going to promote these skills and help these skills to flourish in the future? That is, what is the way forward? And do we architects have a hand to play in that? So that will be my next question. And Architect Pony, I will direct that to you.
Sure. I think we architects are the real game changers, the influencers, and the drivers of any building construction project. And as architects, I'm sure, if we want to promote heritage design and craftsmanship and artisans, what have you, our knowledge of, I would, if I say use this topic or word, history of architecture, I can see a lot of cringing expressions, but our knowledge of history of architecture, our knowledge of our own Indian heritage should be very good. And here I'm going to talk about a concept called identity architecture. And what is identity architecture? It's a fusion of three factors. One is culture, our heritage, something we should be very, very proud of. Second is contact. Contact is how end users interface in that space. And third is building sciences. So we as architects are enablers, facilitators, creators to bring in these three factors in and create beautiful heritage spaces. I'm all for heritage. I think you can have a very contemporary design and then have one heritage element that gives a flavor of heritage. I'm not asking you to actually set up a temple inside your home. No way. I'm just saying that, there is a way in which you can bring in this heritage element in any scale. It can be large scale, it can be small scale. Again, it depends on budget. You need to find a great client who can spend that kind of money. Some of us are lucky enough to have that kind of scenario. But I think identity architecture is something, should be a new design vocabulary for us Indian architects. And there used to be a time when a lot of architects would simply ape Western architecture. And today's COVID scenario has changed all that. We realized that aircon spaces are not a great idea because they breed viruses and bacteria. We need cross ventilation. We need sustainable architecture. And what is sustainable architecture? You use good old age-old techniques. Use your local labor, local materials, and that way you lift your local economy and you lift your national economy. I sound a little nationalist in saying that, but these are good things to happen. And I think COVID-19 has been a very good tool. So if we want to practice identity architecture, hire Indian architects. Come to us, come to all of us. We'll give you fabulous buildings. We'll give you fantastic urban spaces that are evocative, reflective of our heritage. Why? Because we have to give something to our people so that they have an emotional connect to the past, and we need to educate the future generation. Our future generation is so very digital. It spins my head sometimes, but it is information that we need to pass on, which is century old, to the new generation, maybe even post digital generation. That's my take on the role of architects. To promote heritage design.
But Niket?
I think for me, it's quite simple. It's probably an extension. I think besides the obvious, which is, of course, we all encourage local participation. I also think that, we need to encourage the sort of sense of a community, a building community. If you go to some parts of the world, you notice there's a very distinct style of building. Go to places like Bali, you just notice that even the simplest house is built with a great deal of elegance, because the craft is in the hand. It's there. It's the culture, right? So people are encouraged to pick it up. You have a lot of people who can do, cement floors, good woodwork. Today, you notice that finding people who can work with solid wood is a rarity, right? Plywood work much easier. So obviously, there's been a dilution of craft and skill, and perhaps we have a large role to play in that as a community, by perhaps encouraging people, making sure they have work. The challenge for these people is, forget finding patrons, clients. It's also about reaching out to architects. So I think architects can definitely sort of encourage these people, share good craftsmen, so more people know about them. So I think, yeah, we are the platform that can kind of give them visibility. So that's for sure. And one of the things perhaps both we and the larger public need to do is look at the cost of what you're building sort of differently, right? Recently they've been discussing the idea of scrapping old vehicles just to drive up demand in the automotive sector, right? So if we started looking at the cost of breaking down the buildings we built, right? You'll notice that vernacular buildings have a far smaller sort of environmental and disposal cost than contemporary architecture. So if we were to be able to encourage clients to not just look at the cost of the building up front, but look at sort of the life cycle cost, then perhaps newer opportunities to encourage craftsmanship, material would come, and that's something we're constantly negotiating. I mean, it's a thankless exercise because more clients will tend to bail on you than stay with you. But I think yeah, it's something, it's in our DNA, and it's something we're constantly doing, and we're young practice, so we're quite happy taking a few risks here and there. But yeah, that's essentially what I would put out there to as a community try and build the idea of craft. Yeah, that's yeah, whoever's next, go for it.
Great, thanks for that. Jerry?
All right, the question, how to promote this kind of skills. So I would like to go with architect Puni's words, like you have to first promote your heritage and culture. Once you promote your heritage and culture, this craftsman, they definitely by default, it will promote by itself. So as architects, we have to encourage the clients to look for these kind of construction techniques, like what I said earlier. I just want to reiterate those. So I would suggest to go with these kind of age-old techniques of putting up oxide flooring. Nowadays, we spoke about red oxide flooring, no? Those days it is only with red. Nowadays you get with varied colors like orange, yellow, blue, anything of that kind. And we can even polish it with beeswax, where it look more elegant, more shiny than your marble flooring. Whereas the cons here is it will take at least 15 to 21 hours for the entire craftsmanship to complete the flooring. You cannot leave the work and you cannot come back the next day and you can do that. So thereby the cost of this installation increases. Only if architects appreciate these kind of flooring to all other clients, the craftsmanship work, he will get a lot of work and the cost of the labor decrease. Whereas in this, functionally, if you ask me, putting up a redoxic flooring, it's more economical. And as such, if it is in large scale and it is eco-friendly and it is easy to install and easy to maintain, and it cut down the heat, like it breeds, cut down the heat. Other than that, like putting up a lime plastering, not every mason will do that. We need a craftsman to do that. Like putting up, cob walls, which reduces the consumption of, again, air conditioning. It has its own air pockets, which breathes in and out, which will be warm in the summer and it will be cold in the summer and it will be warm in the winter. So these kind of things, and moreover, by promoting all these, we give an aesthetical element to the building, and it is environmental friendly. And then third one is a social. We are going to help the craftsman by suggesting all these kind of stuff to the newer clients, whether they accept it or not. We have to suggest, as architects, we have to put them forth all these kind of stuff. Maybe 2 out of 100 they will accept and they will take it forward. So as architects, we have to promote this kind of craftsmanship, to help the craftsmanship, to relive the moment, to bring back things live, and bringing back the Chennai's old scenario into the newer trend. So that's the role of an architect, to promote skills by itself. First, we have to promote a heritage and culture.
I'm sure we Chennaites are very spirited when it comes to our traditions. I mean, Jallikattu was an example, wasn't it? So if projected in the right direction, I'm sure Chennaites would love to employ these.
Definitely, they will be liking nowadays. As Pony said, after COVID, they are taking up the traditional old food. They said "Unave marundu" in Tamil. Nowadays people take a lot of food as a medicine. Yeah. They are very confident against COVID nowadays. Particularly Indians, and particularly I would say Tamil Nadu, Chennai people, they're very confident against COVID. Maybe if at all a traditional thing comes in, they will also accept these kind of techniques and they will take it forward.
I think we should pitch them with keeping the COVID scenario. Yeah. Jokes aside. Right. Thanks, Jerry, for that. Akwin?
Yes, sir. So as far as this point is concerned,
can you hear me?
Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Ma'am,
you are. I mean, to me, the others,
Yeah, firstly, I thank Pony ma'am for, strongly advocating on behalf of Indian architects. So I believe a lot of people are thankful for that. And coming to this particular point, in the topic, I go with whatever the other architects have told. And I would say, in my point of view, that instead of looking at craftsmanship as only aesthetic elements, if they are proposed to clients as elements of utility, I think there will be a wider, quick acceptance to it. So maybe simple examples like, instead of proposing as, pardon? Mr. Nanda, you're not audible. I'm not able to.
How do we do that?
Maybe let me just quote. Yeah, okay. Let me just quote an example. Say, instead of, let us not look at something like an MSB. Maybe, let us look at a villa or a resort or something of that sort, where we could implement certain traditional age-old methods. Say maybe, we just put up a portico. Instead of, doing the regular interior decor that we do, we could maybe propose a portico out of Madras roofing. And, instead of having regular concrete columns in one particular part, which is like the portico or, some place where we know about proven load, we could actually have a stone sculpture which would be a structural element also. Little things, there are a lot of ways in which we could subtly incorporate details rather than, making it as a very conscious artistic effort or say conscious effort to bring or sell art into that. If we could, design spaces and give these craftsmen oriented work utility value into it, then I think slowly people will start coming into acceptance with it, because everything goes by word and everything goes by a trend. Like Jerry was advocating and talking a lot about red oxide floorings. So just look at what cost it has come up to today. So 10, 15 years back, the cost of red oxide flooring was different. And today, it has come at par to the cost of a marble flooring also. But people are much preferring that today because now it's getting back on trend. So, sometimes as a profession, architects, if willing, and if it is put up as a community effort, we could glamorize certain things. We could glamorize certain trends and then we could make it more desirable. So it's about making clients want certain things. So I think if it is done that way by giving utility value, then definitely, slowly there would be more of a consumption. And what would happen is, even in craftsmen, right, it's about keeping everybody busy. Sometimes what happens is certain craftsmen, they would keep getting loaded with jobs. And there might be a certain segment which does not have so much of opportunities. But when the trends start to spread wide on all scales, not just in large scale projects, but even in day-to-day small size projects, when it gets this utilitarian value, then people of all sectors, they would get equal opportunities and then that benefits would share. That's what I'm. So I'd pass on to the next person.
Raksha?
Yeah, I completely agree on that last point. I think it's also about shifting the way in which we look at craft, and it involves some sort of trend setting. But I also struggle as an architect because we are generalists and we sort of have a specialty in a certain area, unlike the Renaissance master architects who were good sculptors and mathematicians and architects and painters. So with every project, I lack a lot of knowledge when it comes to the vernacular technique. So I tend to bring on the expert and it kind of learn as much as I can about the material and how it's made in situ on site before I introduce it to the client and try to sell it in a way and package it in a way that I know he's going to like and accept, or so I do believe craftsmanship is precious resource and it should be carefully employed rather than sort of exploited. And there are a lot of awareness programs out there, and we need to work on more workshops, educate the architects themselves so that they could then, and vendors are very good in doing this. And also there are great initiatives where we should collaborate between artisans and urban designers and brands to sort of explore opportunities together to create these kinds of trends that we were just speaking about. And you have great foundations like Auroville Building Center and a Center for Vernacular Architecture that help promote these skills and link up architects with the right craftsmen and the right talent. And I think that gap needs to be bridged and is completely missing because we are also insular in our own world and so busy with what we're doing that we don't really go out there and actively seek this. And so it really comes down to a matter of time. And I feel if the outreach programs were easier to communicate with, then we wouldn't have that sort of gap, and we could probably push the clients to get there. And I think architects are responsible not only for how your buildings perform in terms of energy, but also to strive for a kind of bringing back memories of the past and generate narratives that kind of are with the present and kind of have a modern interpretation. I think that's what will work. That's where I see the way forward, especially with the clients I'm sort of dealing with. Yeah, I think that's my thoughts for now on this question on how to flourish the arts.
A little bit more sensitivity to the local culture and context, I think, as a starting point. And from there, I think you can take it on, to the direction of the craftsman. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Great. So pretty much, I think we have thrown in some light on the craftsmanship, which is prevailing in Chennai, and ways to go about it and what holds for the future. So that concludes our discussion. And before we all sign off, rather, we have a Q&A session. So since we are running short of time, and we would quickly take on 1 or 2 questions. I have 1 question, and I would request the viewers to type in the question as early as possible. So if you could, so then we can include that. So I'll start with, shall we start the Q&A? Right. Okay. So I'll start with 1 question from Shivangi Agarwal. I think she has directed towards all the panelists. She wants to know, Chennai has seen a lot of transformation in its architectural style and landscape. What does the future hold for this metropolitan city in terms of the built environment? Now, who would like to answer? Anyone? So what is the future for the Chennai built environment? Akwin, you want to go?
Can you repeat the second part of the question?
Yeah, what does the future, I think it comes back to the future again. I think it's not towards the craftsmanship, it's a general, in terms of built environment. What does the future hold for Chennai city? Akwin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
So now, see, talking about the built environment of the city, let us consider skyline. See, what could possibly change from now on is that, we designing responsibly, we could make more sustainable buildings which are, not having much of unnecessary elements on it. And we could be a bit more sensitive to the built environment, because in between, a certain time period, a certain decade, lot of architecture came up which did not belong to the place. It was just kind of mimicking what was happening in the West, and definitely in between, there was a little bit of bad architecture. But that was again, by client demand. It is not a conscious effort by the architects to mimic the West, but rather that just came up as requirements from a lot of clientele, and that was answered. So I think we should always, in future, design with thinking of complete cycle of the building. So, today, now we've largely transformed into steel buildings. Slowly we are taking that transformation. But, a decade back, it was still with concrete buildings. We all know that, concrete is about 6 to 7 decades. That is the age of concrete and all that. So have you even thought about what happens to the debris after this particular point? So, what we built 50 years back, say 20 years later, 2 decades down the line, we are going to have issues with the concrete debris management, because there is a huge pile of concrete that we have to handle when we break it down. So certain issues which might creep up in the future, I think we should start thinking of it right away. So that way, you have enough of time to research and troubleshoot it when the issues come. Or else what will happen is, all of a sudden, one day we wake up to the issues of how polluted the sea is and we are going bonkers over it. So, like this, there are a lot of things which we have not paid attention to in the past, which might be a shocking revelation. So, design should be a conscious effort. And for that, definitely, I think there's a role for the government to play, because, see, there are architects who are willing to support. Like everybody said, we are nation builders and we could do a lot more. But the responsibility and importance of architecture and architects should be understood mainstream. See, there's still, in a growing economy like Chennai, a lot of people do not understand what is the importance of architecture by itself and why you need to hire an architect to do a big project. Big or small doesn't matter. People still haven't, of course, now there is a drastic change. A lot of people are coming into the terms that, you really need an architect and you have to give the job to him or her and they will do a good job for you. But I think there is more mainstream acceptance which is required. And then as a community effort, we could definitely build a much better future and find solution to a lot of problems that which would arise.
I'll go next. Nanda, I have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, yes, please.
I think, Akwin has put on some very, very, thrown in a lot of important points. Chennai has gone through a huge transformation. We've had a very glorious past. Then we had colonization, and then the Britishers came. They built all these beautiful colonial buildings. Then post-independence, we had a lot of changes, and then we moved on to Western architecture. And today we're finding thanks to COVID, that this business of glass buildings doesn't fly. Aircon is not the best environment to sit in. You need sustainable architecture. You need cross ventilation. You'll have to look with the migrant labor issues. You need to harness in more local labor. There has to be a database of, craftsmanship, artisans. How do you access them? So I think the canvas is once again blank in the sense that, and it's for the good, because I've always seen, design goes through a set of evolution, a set of trial and errors, and then you come to a certain conclusion and say, okay, this didn't work out. Maybe this is better. And I think we've reached a stage where we've realized this aping Western architecture is not a good idea. It's not fun to anymore bring in more stuff from China. No point creating another Singapore in our backyards. We need to have more local, more heritage oriented, more, I'm not saying heritage, we still practice contemporary architecture, but we bring in the flavor of heritage design. We need to bring in more local architects. And I'll tell you something, when I started my practice 2.5 years ago, my goodness, people called me an engineer. They never called me an architect. Engineer was, architect was somebody who gave a fancy elevation and go away. Everything else is entrusted to the engineer.
Forget your days, ma'am. Even still today, when I deal with some clients who are from tier 2 or tier 3 or any other remote places, I think they do call me in fact, I was so heartbroken to see my name is saved in the mobile as Engineer Nanda.
Look at that. So I think it's been a culture in the state to, depend more on the engineer as opposed to the architects. So there's another important point is that government has stepped in, not to say it has not stepped in, but I think it has to be more proactive to see how best to bring in architects into the mainstream of decision making. Because I feel architects are more empathetic when it comes to human requirements and needs. And I think government, NGOs, I don't know, a lot of quasi-government bodies need to step in and take in more architects into their think tank and ideate on ideas that can be more, useful, more futuristic, because we'll have to start now thinking about 20 years down the road. And I think COVID has been an excellent tool in my mind for us to have a pause, rethink, contemplate, reflect on what went wrong and what could be set right. So I think there's a lot of fantastic scope. I'm on the advisory council of many universities and educational, activities. And I find there's a lot of women jumping into this profession. And I think it's a good thing. I find a lot of young Indian architects, graduating out with such lovely ideas. So I think there's a lot of potential out there. It's a question of using the right potential to create something beautiful for our city. There's a lot of hope, trust me.
And Shivangi, to answer a little bit from my side, I've traveled around a lot of European countries as part of my job. I've been to Sweden, a less densely populated country. They have this concept of co-housing, living together. When we share things and then we minimize the energy requirement, we minimize the burden on the environment, and people with less population and less damage they do to the environment, and look at possibilities like co-housing just purely from the environment point of view. And people like us in Chennai with our density of population that is just exploding out of control, and something like that, exploring options like co-housing, sharing would definitely reduce the need, definitely can bring the balance of needs to some extent. So I would like to add to that. Right, so we'll move on to the next question. I think the time that we have, we'll have one more question. So I think then we'll get to the end. And this is from Salma to all the panelists. I think she's asking a business question. Most of our clients don't appreciate traditional crafts. What are your comments on it?
I was just replying to Salma, actually. I was like,
say it loud and clear. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, Salma, the key is really in storytelling and making them love the tradition. And I have a 4-year-old daughter, so a lot of it, I'm getting better at storytelling every night. So it's really about how you package it to the client, and really your business selling skills need to be completely, pull everything you can from all the best business books in the world. But it really lies in that storytelling and, good computer graphics and innovative design solutions. I'm sure the clients will definitely go for it. So I think that's where the key is.
I think just like we sell our design concept, yeah. So some of us are passionate about a certain way of designing, be it form building or whatever it is. How we try to convince our clients, I think we should be a little bit more sensitive to bring these aspects as well. The same way we deal with that.
Absolutely. And I feel like as architects, you have to also have a degree in psychology in a way, because you really need to understand where they're coming from, what experiences they've been through before you sort of really. So most of the time I'm like trying to analyze them before I propose a solution. So I think that's part of the job.
So hope that answers Salma's question. I think we have come to the end of the session. So I think the organizers are asking me to wind up as early as possible. So I would like to conclude it by having a closing line. Yeah. So each architect can give a closing line, something for the viewers to take home. So I'll again start with Architect Puni. What would be that?
I think the role of craftsmanship and artisans, and I'm calling it heritage design, is definitely here to stay. There is no, challenge to it. As architects and designers, we welcome it. I personally promote it. And I would say this, I wish history of architecture is taught better in institutions, more in a more practical way, so that even students are drawn by it at their, first year, second year level. So I think one is knowledge. As game changers and influencers, our knowledge has to be very good. We have to be proud of our heritage, and whatever technology we use, this craft, this design philosophy is never going to go. It's going to remain, and it will remain for the next 1,000 years. This is my take.
Nikit?
I think just keep building, keep doing what everyone's doing. Yeah. And yeah, it should be good.
I'm glad nobody's talking about COVID as a closing line. I'm very glad for that. So let's stick to architecture. Yeah, Nikit. Yeah, you want to continue? Yeah.
That's pretty much it. Just keep building, keep doing what we always did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jerry?
It's not a takeaway. Actually, it's a request for the clients, architects, people who are viewing it. I would rather ask them to appreciate every craftsmanship. From this day, maybe whoever watches this webinar after time, I would request them to appreciate the craftsmanship, whether they can explore it and we can help the craftsmanship to grow, rather letting them die, letting the craftsmanship die, So that's a request actually from my side, and I can take it also as a takeaway from it. I would rather recommend, out of my 10 projects, I would recommend the craftsmanship for all the projects, and I would like to convert one of the projects with this kind of craftsmanship. Thank you.
Akwin?
I would say let us all be sensitive, understanding. Let us know our roots, the crafts. Let us promote it. Like it was told by Suraksha, let us all, engage our clients through storytelling and do our pitching as our part for society. And yes, let us balance it with the technologies which are available. Let us remember that we have to design for the economy, but of course, consider humanity also alongside. I think that would be my closing line.
Raksha?
Yeah, I think craftsmanship is a legacy. As young architects like myself, I think it's important we preserve it like an inheritance tool. And it reminds me of the story of that precious Japanese vase making crafts. I think it's called kintsugi, where when they are making the porcelain bowls, sometimes a few of them break. And what they do is they kind of put the shards back together with gold lacquered, sort of dusted adhesive, and it brings new meaning to that bowl, and that itself is like a trend. And I think that's how we should also approach it, where we are through better education and collaboration, we should revisit the vernacular crafts in a sort of a contemporary reinterpretation of the local heritage and bring in that blend of form and texture and celebrate that sort of timeless aesthetic. And that's really the challenge for all of us as architects. I think we must approach it in that sort of way rather than a craft gone, which we're never going to see again.
Right. So that we have come to the conclusion. Well, my closing line would be anyone can design space, but the one who designs experience, I think, makes the building more special. I'm sure craftsmen and artisans can play a role in to designing experiences. And if you are from Chennai and if you have them on board, and definitely they can give you the experience. Thank you.
Well said.
Thank you. Thank you. Right. I would sincerely like to thank all our panelists for giving your time and sharing your knowledge and encouraging our craftsmanship and our craftsmen. Thank you. And I would also like to thank DesignWorks, Mr. Jignesh and Ms. Vanshika. Thank you so much for organizing this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. See you.
Thank you.
Thank you.